to a movie that just came out on Hulu this weekend, and that is Nomadland. Nomadland is a movie directed by Chloé Zhao, written by Chloé Zhao, based on a book by Jessica Bruder, and it stars Frances McDormand. And I'm going to start out on this one, talk about what Nomadland is all about here. So Nomadland, like I said, stars Frances McDormand as this woman who kind of lost everything coming out of the Great Recession of the like end of the 2000s, beginning of the 2010s, and she decides to live a nomadic life in her van, kind of working her way through the western half of the United States, um, going around to different seasonal jobs in the area, getting money here and there. And the movie is really just that. It's her and her travels and the people that she interacts with along the way. And her dealing with kind of the the trauma of what happened, of how she had to leave and why she's kind of living this life. She says at one point she's not homeless, she's houseless. There is a difference, and I think that that's kind of sums up the movie in a really great way. Um, I think I think this movie is amazing. It is a borderline masterpiece here. Chloe Zhao shows that she's got this ability to make a movie that nobody else is making right now. She made it with the writer of just this very simple slice of life thing with these very real people. And now now that she made that, she's able to do it and get a little bit of star power in there and make a very similar movie. And so this is like if the writer had an established one of the best actresses we have working now at the front of it. That's what Nomadland is. The direction, the cinematography is gorgeous throughout the entire thing. This is an amazing performance by Frances McDormand, partially because it's so different than any of her performances. I guess the closest you could come to is maybe Three Billboards, but it's so much more reserved and constrained. I don't think this is her best performance, but I might say this might be her highest war performance, because I don't know if anybody else could have pulled off this role quite the way that Frances McDormand did. It was I was completely blown away by it. That and yeah, I loved it. I loved so much of it. So this is a 4-star movie for me. This is a 2020 movie that we just got access to now. It's cracking my top 5 of my 2020 my 2020 films. So that's my thoughts on it. Just a brilliant movie here. We're gonna go to Todd next.
Okay, so I like the movie a lot too. I feel like it's like sort of has that like micro budget Van Sant Soderbergh kind of feel, but it has like the beauty and style that Chloe Zhao, like minimalism, and it's just refreshing to see a movie that is sweeping all the awards without, and then maybe gonna get Best Director when it's not at all like a normal Best Director winner. This would be like if Sideways beat $1 Million Baby for Best Director. It's not flashy, everything is underplayed, but it's gorgeous. And the movie, it's like really quiet and meditative. Like the Dardenne brothers come to mind with how delicate and quiet it is, and like while it's still exploring dark themes, and it's almost poetic in the cinematography and the music, which evidently isn't original, but it's some of the best like uses of music I saw in any movie that was released in 2020. It's like a less intense, like Leave No Trace almost, or like a less plot driven Into the Wild. But since we have like Oscar royalty as the lead, it's getting all the accolades, which I don't have a problem with that. It's difficult to really understand Fern's plight. I feel like you can relate to her, but you can't really understand why she's exactly living the way she is when she doesn't really have to. And maybe that's the point. It's a study of this like cross section of people who like are completely overlooked by other people and by like governments. And because McDormand is not like Meryl Streep or like Susan Sarandon or somebody who would have completely played it up, we believe in Fern. And even though we don't really necessarily have to get her, because she's just so convincing and lived in that role, and especially in a world of like non-actors, and sometimes she even lets those non-actors like upstage her in emotional scenes, which I think is awesome because she's so subtle and brilliant. And I want to see the movie again because I can't fully sign off on it being like this like gushing of support Best Picture movie, but I can really appreciate it, and I think it could be a classic. The more like familiar I get with the supporting players in the movie. It's almost like a narrative version of like Vernon, Florida or something like that. But I'm giving it 3.5 stars. I love the movie too.
All right, good. All right, Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we're thrice approved on this one.
Good.
I know, Terry, did you ever see The Rider? I can't remember.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I know, well, I had The Rider pretty high on my, what was it, 2017 list. Loved it. This movie would also make my 2020 list. I don't know exactly where it would be, but it's a 4-star movie. And for all the reasons that you guys both mentioned, I guess a couple things that I would add is like, there are several points in this movie where you start thinking that, okay, well, we've seen movies like this before. We've seen Easy Rider. We've seen Lost in America. Even the French movie Vagabond, the Agnes Varda film, I thought a lot about while watching this movie. And in each of those movies, for one thing, those are all about protagonists who are able to travel the country because they're kind of bored with their lives. I mean, they kind of, to some degree or another, have midlife crises. Not so much the character in Vagabond, but certainly Lost in America and Easy Rider, and even Into the Wild, in a sense. I mean, the Emile Hirsch character in that movie is really privileged, and he's a college student, he has affluent parents and all that. What I find fascinating about this movie is that, you know, Frances McDormand is forced to adopt this nomadic lifestyle because of the financial toll that her life has taken as a result of, you know, this town that she lives in shutting down. And it's the same thing with all those other cast-offs in that Arizona ranch that they're at. It's sort of like a complete inversion of what we typically see in these kind of modern frontier movies about the American landscape. Another thing that I just loved about this movie is that, you know, I kept holding my breath. I was wondering when we would start getting those kind of Oscar baity moments. Like, you know, there's a part in this movie where, you know, her van breaks down, and we start thinking, okay, well, here comes the moment when she's going to have to start panhandling for money or hitchhiking. We see her destitute on the street, and she's about to die, and she's sleeping on a park bench. But this movie doesn't ever do that. There's also, you know, a dynamic between her and the David Strathairn, the character, where we think there might be some kind of romantic relationship that develops. But the movie always kind of sidetraps those sort of conventional Hollywood routes, those conventions that we're used to seeing so much in lesser movies. Even the scene with Fern's sister, who doesn't fully approve of her lifestyle, I think is handled in a way that's really unique and not quite in a way I've ever seen done in another movie before. You're right. This movie does have incredible landscapes. I thought a lot about Terrence Malick watching this movie with the really narrow lens. It feels like, you know, he's always on the Z-axis and the camera's always mobile. And some of those shots, like in the redwoods, are just amazing. It's a tragedy that this movie won't be really seen on the big screen anywhere. Frances McDormand is amazing in this movie. I can't. The Rider kind of did this convention where it like blended real people, and they kind of keep their names. It's the same with this movie, and even kind of at the beginning, you could almost mistake it for Frances McDormand playing herself in this movie. Her name is Fern. The performances, I guess, I don't even know if you call them performances, but like Swanky and Linda May and Bob Wells are like fascinating real life people, and you know, I dig that stuff up. I mean, those performances, those scenes are so much more natural and so much more real than anything scripted you could possibly see, and it's because they look like real people and they talk like real people, and that's the kind of movies, that's the kind of scenes and characters that I crave in movies, and we don't get nearly enough of. I love that this movie's contemplative. I love that it's slow, and I love that it makes you kind of pause and reflect almost on your own life in a way. And I also love that she's not a victim. She's not just some passive, the victim of circumstances out of her control. Like, I love that she's in control all the time, and she has a really I don't know if we call it an upbeat attitude, but her attitude is not one of being passive or someone that something terrible has happened to. Like Todd was kind of saying, like, it's a choice that she chooses to live this way, and it's not necessarily that we watch the movie and weep for her. You know, we can understand the appeal of the way that she lives. So I think it's a really complex movie. I think it's a movie that will probably be misunderstood by a lot of audiences. I think it's also a movie very much about grief. And then I think we need to talk about what are the real chances that this movie wins Best Picture. I think it is way too artsy and goes way too above the head of most Oscar voters. And unfortunately, we've seen so-called, Best Picture front runners in the last few years, like Boyhood and Roma, also kind of just go over Oscar voters' heads. I get the sense that because there's no scene where she breaks down and cries and talks about the end of the American dream and how her husband is dead, there's no Oscar moments like that. I think it will go past a lot of Oscar voters' heads, which is unfortunate. But, a lot of the best movies this decade didn't win Best Picture. So,
Yeah, I don't think it's winning Best Picture, but I still think it has a really good chance of Best Director, which I think is even weirder because it's not a real flashy Best Director winner. Like that's what all of the ones since they switched the voting with the Best Picture, like it's split all the time because the flashy ones getting Best Director and the more grounded movies getting Best Picture. But I still don't think this feels like a Best Picture winner, if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I think Roma's a good comparison in kind of where it sits right now because Roma swept through all of the critics stuff, and heading into the major awards, it was the one that everyone was looking at, and it still got the director win. But yeah, it turned out to just be a little too artsy for and maybe unapproachable for the Hollywood elite that are voting on the Oscars to reach. And I mean that's one of the things I've heard about it too is it's going to be hard to it's not as relatable as some of the other films. So well, if it's not as relatable, then people aren't paying attention to what's going on. I had to drive through Portland today. Living a nomadic life and being houseless is a very relatable thing going on right now. And if people think this isn't a relatable movie to what's happening in the world right now, they're blind and they're not paying attention. I think that's a huge part of it, and I thought that was a fascinating thing. I mean, I watched the movie this morning, and then I drove through Portland today, and I couldn't help but think about this movie as I did because there are people everywhere just living on the streets because that's what they got.
yeah, the movie never delves into poverty porn, and it doesn't have those grand sweeping statements about, this is life in America in the 2010s. And I feel like, especially for older voters, that's kind of what they want. They want more heavy-handed sort of stuff. And I think younger voters may also feel alienated by this movie because it is mostly about older characters and economic circumstances that they're not maybe familiar with. It's also not a particularly diverse or inclusive movie. So I feel like because based on the way that the Oscar voting system works, the contrived method it works, it may have a lot of people who like it, but maybe no one who loves it. That may be enough for it to win Best Picture, but I don't know if it's going to have like significant, defenders who absolutely love the movie. We love Parasite on this podcast. It was one of the great moments of the Oscars of the last 20 years. But Parasite made a very clear points throughout about socioeconomic inequality, and they had big speeches and big moments of drama and heightened tension. And this movie just isn't like that at all. Another comparison is like the Florida Project. Another movie that I know Todd had predicted was going to be a real Best Picture contender, but also a movie that was about socioeconomic inequality, but didn't always address it in a really didactic way with heavy-handed speeches or anything like that. And it was too sophisticated for Oscar voters.
I know, but even that, it wasn't sweeping all the critic awards like this is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I feel like it has a lot in common with Leave No Trace. Leave No Trace was more like had thrills because I mean, similarly, you don't really necessarily understand the main character, but I mean, that movie's completely forgotten because nobody cares it was Ben Foster. But this is Frances McDormand, so everyone really is paying attention, and since nobody's seeing things on the big screen anyway, everyone is sort of like coming back to the same middle of like, yeah, this is a great movie, and it's kind of hard to deny.
Yeah, well, and we'll know more in the next couple of weeks, but what do you guys think about her chances for Best Actress? I would put Carey Mulligan above her at this point, but I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think.
I still feel like we know nothing about Best Actress. There's 4 people that could win, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still standing by what I said earlier when we reviewed Pieces of Women. I think Vanessa Kirby's winning Best Actress. That's the kind of role that wins Best Actress and Best Actor nowadays. But I mean, won't know that until after the Golden Globes.
See, and I would say Viola Davis is a front runner. So
there we go.
we can all hit.
But I'd be totally fine if Frances McDormand wins her 3rd Oscar. Then cool. Like I mean, I have no problem with that. She's one of the most beloved people in all of Hollywood. So.
And does it in such a different way too. I mean, Meryl Streep is beloved and gets all the notoriety because she gets a lot of great roles that she can just sink her teeth into. Frances McDormand doesn't work a whole lot anymore, and she waits for those really perfect roles for her. And so I think because of that she hasn't gotten the notoriety, but she is one of the best working actors, man or woman, out there today. And I think that's Florida Project was a really good comparison too, because I feel like if Florida Project had come out this year, it would have the same like persona as Nomadland going into this race. But I also think you had a great point.
Like movies about kids though.
Yeah, that's true. but I think you had a good point too, that Frances McDormand is in this, so it's getting a little more notoriety. But also, I think a lot of people saw the writer and liked it after the fact, after everything had happened, and then Chloe Zhao has a profile now because later
The
this year
Marvel.
she's coming out with a Marvel movie, and I am fascinated to see what someone with this level of skill of minimalism does with a blockbuster Marvel film. I am fascinated to see how those two styles mesh in that movie that's coming out, The Eternals.
Well, if she's doing that job so she could finance this movie, then I guess it was worth it, right?
Man, the way
I don't
she
know
makes
that
her
she really
movies,
needed
though,
that
one
much
Marvel
behind it.
movie can make her about 150 of these movies.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be nice.
Zach, I don't think you ever gave your star rating for this.
Oh, I'd give it 4
Yeah, give it
stars.
4.
And I would also like. Do you think there was a better like war performance this year than Frances McDormand? Going back to what you were saying, Terry, I couldn't see anyone else playing this role.
Yeah, that's where I was at too. I think, yeah, well, like you said, I think it might be the highest war of the year.
Well, I mean, I said that Pete Davidson gave the best performance of the year, and I still stand by that. But I mean, Paul Raci, I don't know that anyone else is doing that role.
That's a good point too.
Yeah.
Maybe Frances McDormand the highest war for lead performance. Paul Raci best for supporting, potentially. All right, but we have two given it 4 stars, 1 3.5. It is thrice approved. Check it out. It is on Hulu now. It is also in some theaters if theaters are open near you. If you are able to get there, this would be a great one to see on the big screen because of how gorgeous the cinematography is in this. So check it out if you can.